was fairly anxious coming into this NASCAR season for a variety of reasons. New car that had some issues during testing, some new tracks, new venues like the LA Memorial Coliseum, but perhaps no race has given me quite as much worry as this weekend's race at Atlanta Motor Speedway. The all-new Atlanta Super Speedway, if you will. Was SMI right to make these changes, or will they live to regret them? How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove. Friday afternoon, as I'm recording this, NASCAR just canceled all on-track activity today, so I believe the Cup Series at least is still gonna get some practice tomorrow, but weather has impacted what was already expected to be a treacherous and unpredictable weekend. Today, I'm gonna talk all about the new Atlanta Motor Speedway. A track that in just a few months went from being a favorite amongst drivers to now being probably near the bottom of everyone's lists. Drivers made their opinions loud and clear last summer when this change was announced, and now that the race weekend is here, you still hear a lot of apprehension in their voices. Today we're going to discuss whether or not this new Atlanta Motor Speedway configuration will prove to be a mistake. Because we haven't actually seen a race there yet. Tomorrow, Trucks and Xfinity Cup on Sunday, but we're gonna make some predictions ahead of time. So let's start at the beginning. Last July, NASCAR and Speedway Motorsports announced that Atlanta Motor Speedway would not only be repaved before the 2022 season, but would also be reconfigured in a dramatic way. Over the offseason, they added banking to the corners, going from 24 degrees to now 28 degrees of banking, making this the steepest mile and a half on the NASCAR schedule. They also narrowed the turns about 15 feet. They're now 40 feet across. And SMI also, with some help from the all-new Drivers Advisory Council, modified the exit wall there in turn 4 onto the front straightaway, changing the angle slightly so it was less perilous for drivers at speed. Those are the highlights. NASCAR now considers this track a super speedway. Cup, Xfinity, and Trucks are all running their super speedway engine packages this weekend. So for the Cup Series, they're gonna put a tapered spacer on the engine, limiting the horsepower to roughly 510, exactly what they run at Daytona and Talladega this year. Cup is going full super speedway. They're also running the large super speedway spoilers. Xfinity and Trucks are running their intermediate track spoilers. There will be a double yellow line rule at Atlanta this weekend, even though the line is actually like red and white, I think. The only difference really between this Atlanta race and a super speedway race is the choose rule. They will have the choose rule in effect this weekend at Atlanta. Again, we've not seen any on-track action yet this weekend. Everything was rained out today, but there was a test back in January, and it was really all single car runs. A few guys, like 2 or 3 cars drafted together, but we really didn't get an idea then of what the racing would really look like, and it sounds like even today, most of the drivers, even those who have tested multiple cars at this new track, have no idea what the racing is going to look like. So I'm genuinely worried about how this race is going to play out, and I'm focusing on the Cup race. Like I said, coming into this year, I was worried about every race. Would the next gen hold up anywhere? So far, the next gen has passed with flying colors, in my opinion. The Clash was fantastic. They drafted well at Daytona. Auto Club Vegas, maybe the 2 best races in those tracks' histories. Many of my worries, at least in the short term, have dissipated in regards to the next gen car. So now, when I look at the remaining races on this schedule, Atlanta Motor Speedway is the one track I am most worried about. Atlanta Motor Speedway used to be a favorite amongst drivers. Now it is likely feared by most drivers, and not in a good way. Not in the same way drivers fear Talladega and it adds to the mystery and the lore. No, they fear Atlanta because 1, it's a complete unknown, but 2, if the racing actually ends up looking like how NASCAR wants it to look, I think drivers just aren't going to be a fan of it. It's going to be a super speedway race, and few drivers truly love super speedway racing. Atlanta Motor Speedway needed to be repaved. We were getting to the point where races had to be red flagged because parts of the asphalt were breaking apart during the race. As much as I hate to say it, as much as the old worn out surface was beautiful and held most of the track's charm, the time was coming. If not this year, very, very soon. The place needed to be repaved. It did not, however, need to be reconfigured. SMI, Speedway Motorsports, their own company, not owned by NASCAR, chose to reconfigure this track. And this continues a recent trend of Speedway Motorsports reconfiguring their racetracks. They did it to Las Vegas way back in the day. They did it to Texas Motor Speedway. They've done it to Bristol. They did it to Kentucky. And actually, this reminds me of a quote from Denny Hamlin back in July last year when they first announced this change. Denny Hamlin said, "With all due respect, this same group has reconfigured Texas, Kentucky, Bristol with 0 driver input. One of those lost a race, Texas. Other one we don't race at anymore, Kentucky. And the last one we put dirt over it. But hey, what do the drivers know?" I know a lot of fans like to write off everything Denny Hamlin says as just him whining or complaining, and sure, maybe he does that a lot, but I agree wholeheartedly with his statement there. Texas was ruined by their most recent reconfiguration. Bristol, I mean, they've had to spray PJ1 on it, they've had to change it up more and more as the years go on when they added progressive banking. Kentucky's not on the schedule anymore. Denny Hamlin makes a great point there. Speedway Motorsports does not have the cleanest or the most consistent track record when it comes to reconfiguring their racetracks. Now, from Speedway Motorsports, I understand them taking risks. Their catalog of tracks are largely intermediate tracks. Atlanta, Charlotte, Texas, Kentucky, Las Vegas. They kind of have a lot of the same thing. So to SMI's credit, they're trying to mix things up. Texas is a little different from Las Vegas now. Atlanta is sure as a heck a lot different than Charlotte. At least now all their mile and a halves look a little bit different. So I understand SMI, they're limited. They only have mile and a halves. They built all those mile and a halves 25 years ago when NASCAR was at its peak, when NASCAR was rising. They needed to fill 100,000 seats. Those days have now come and gone, and many of these mile and a halves are outdated. SMI is trying to revitalize them and trying some new risky things. I respect the risk taking, but at some point, you gotta notice that most of these risks just aren't panning out. I mean, Texas is on the verge of, one, it might lose an IndyCar race, might lose their IndyCar race by next year. And in the case of NASCAR, you can tell NASCAR's trying to get away from it. I mean, there was 10 guys at the race last fall. I've seen junior high football games with more fans in the stands than last fall at Texas Motor Speedway. So SMI does not have the cleanest track record when it comes to reconfiguring, especially mile and a half racetracks. Not to mention, what also worries me about this is the fact that they used iRacing. Remember their original announcement last July, iRacing came out and said, hey, we collaborated with NASCAR on this. Steve Myers, we're really excited to use our new technologies to help envision new future racetracks and everything. And that just worries me, because if you go back to that announcement, they showed some clips of iRacing, the cars driving at New Atlanta, and yeah, they're in a pack. It's simulation, it's iRacing. With all due respect to iRacing, as Joey Logano once said, it's a tool, and every tool has its limits. I'm all for using iRacing to maybe envision new racetracks. They've done that with the Chicago Street Course. They did it with the LA Clash, the Coliseum, and that race turned out really well. But a quarter-mile bull ring is completely different from a mile and a half now super speedway. And as great as the iRacing engine may be, as great as their simulations may be, they can't get every nuance exactly right. Everything about the tire, the aero, it's not going to be exactly right. So iRacing being so heavily involved with this reconfiguration, SMI's track record with mile and a half reconfigurations, and even quotes from drivers as recently as this week, all have me very concerned. Like Justin Allgaier was on Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s podcast this week. He participated in those tests a couple months ago, and he said this week that during those tests, nobody ever moved off the bottom lane. Granted, it was mostly single car runs, but that has me a little worried. Repaves typically turn to one-lane racetracks. Even though they reconfigured this one, it may still see a similar fate. Justin Allgaier admitted he doesn't expect to see Daytona-style pack racing. He said in his interview that he doesn't envision 3-wide racing 10 rows back in year one. He said maybe they'll get to that point, but he doesn't expect it right now. I read a Fox Sports article written by Bob Pockrass. Denny Hamlin had a quote in there where he said, I don't know if we're going to be drafting. I don't think we're going to be tight pack racing. This just sounds like the 2018 All-Star race. Remember when they put actual restrictor plates on the cars in 2018? And, for restarts, yeah, we saw crazy 2, 3, 4 wide pack racing. It looked like the most recent 550 package. But look here, 20 laps into a run. Look how spread out it is. That looks like every other mile and a half, just with less horsepower and less off throttle time. Obviously, that was the Gen 6. That was less horsepower. Atlanta's going to have more banking. It's a fresh surface. So, I'm not going to say they're going to race exactly the same. But if I had to make a prediction, my guess is Sunday is going to look like the 2018 All-Star race. And that All-Star race was fine. We're used to gimmicks in the All-Star race, but we go to Atlanta now twice a year. We'll be back here in just a few months, so I hope this weekend's not a complete mess. I liked the idea of Atlanta being turned into a smaller super speedway much better back when we thought NASCAR was going to run 550 horsepower everywhere. Remember, it wasn't until December, January that NASCAR suddenly flipped and said, nope, we're going to run 670 at everywhere. Up until that point, it looked like we were going to have lower horsepower, higher drag racing at all the big tracks. So the idea of an Atlanta super speedway didn't sound terrible. It sounded like, okay, maybe that'll be a little better than some of the other mile and a half races we'll be seeing. But now that we've seen 670 horsepower and low downforce on the next gen, we've seen them slip and slide around Auto Club, around Las Vegas. This Atlanta super speedway idea sounds a lot less appealing. It just seems more desperate, which we already knew it was. Again, SMI has been taking bold risks with their mile and a halves for several years now in an attempt to continue to fill grandstands, something they have struggled to do so at many of these tracks. But now it really looks that way. Now it really looks desperate. And it already looks outdated because it was built for a different race car. It was built for a different rules package, I should say. Look, Pack racing is one of the things that sets NASCAR apart from every other major motorsport series. And let's be honest, super speedways, pack racing are some of NASCAR's most popular events. But these first few weeks of racing with the next gen car have been so refreshing. It's been so nice not seeing cars planted in the corners at these 1.5 miles. Racing on a baby super speedway this weekend, effectively adding 2 more super speedway races to the schedule this year, just doesn't excite me as much as I originally thought it would. Back when we were so used to seeing 550 horsepower everywhere, Homestead, Las Vegas, Atlanta even. Like, Atlanta's a great track, worn out surface was so much fun to watch, but seeing it with 550 horsepower the last couple of years just didn't have the same charm. So back when 550 horsepower seemed to be the permanent culture shift within the NASCAR Cup Series garage, an Atlanta Super Speedway race made a lot more sense. But now the culture has thankfully pivoted away from low horsepower, high drag racing and into the loose racing that we see today. A new super speedway, a baby super speedway, a Frankenstein's monster of sorts of a super speedway just doesn't have the same appeal. I'll be honest. So maybe the racing will be fantastic this weekend. Maybe we'll see a fantastic side-by-side, beating and banging action. It will be thrilling and it will be a great show and a great competitive race. But everything we've seen and heard up to this point has me worried. Share your thoughts down in the comment section below. Will you be at Atlanta Motor Speedway to witness this new experiment in person? Will you be watching on TV? What are your expectations? Are you concerned? Are you not concerned? Share your thoughts down in the comment section below. But that is gonna do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're new to the channel and you like talking about NASCAR, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future uploads. And as always, a big thank you to my amazing Patreon supporters as well. I couldn't do this show without your support. I'll see you guys again Sunday night after the Cup Series race. I'm hoping for a good show. I'm just not convinced we'll see one. But keeping my fingers crossed, I want this event to succeed, especially since we have to race here twice a year. Hopefully Sunday night is not a disappointment. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you again very, very soon.